This is Scott the Fix-It Guy. Today we're dealing with the direct drive washing machine. This is made by Kenmore or Whirlpool, but we don't get any spin. We can hear the motor, kind of a clicking sound, but no spin, no agitation. So this is due to a broken motor coupler. So we're going to unplug it or turn off the breaker. And we're going to change out that motor coupler so we get agitation and spin again. So we're going to remove two Phillips head screws from the corner of the console. And this is on the Whirlpool Direct Drive Series 70, 80, or 90. A very popular model, very easy to work on. And these motor couplers break when they get overloaded, like when we're trying to wash a blanket or bathroom mats or too big of a load. So we're going to undo this modular connector. This is for the lid switch. Just pull back on this tab and lift up. And then we'll remove these two brass clips. We're going to push the standard head screwdriver in and then push it back, and that'll release the clip. We'll do this side, we push it in, push it back, releases the clip. And now we can take the whole cabinet off of the frame, off of the chassis. So we're going to lift it up about 45 degrees and just put it off to the side so we have a nice, easy working area. This could be the same procedure for changing the water pump or changing the motor. So down here we have the water pump and the motor, and we're going to pry off these little clips, the standard head screwdriver, and we're going to pull the pump right off the motor and kind of put it off to the side. We want to remove these two 1/4 inch screws, and they're really just there to hold on a couple of clips that hold on the motor, so we have to get those screws out. Some models don't have those screws. And then we're going to take this motor power module off. We're going to just lift up on the tab and then wiggle it off. And then there's another modular connector on this model. Some models don't have it. And then there's a capacitor that has two leads connected to it. This is the modular connector. We're going to pull it apart. And then these two leads on the capacitor. Be careful not to touch those terminals on the capacitor because you can get a shock. Now we're going to pry off these clips with a standard head screwdriver, the bottom one and then the top one. So you might want to push in on the motor a little bit, and then the motor should come off. You may need to pull it a little bit, and it'll release off of the motor coupler. There we go. There's the motor. And the motor coupler we can see there connected to the transmission. And it's comprised of a rubber piece and then two plastic pieces. This plastic piece that connected to the motor was broken, and that's why the motor would spin, but the transmission wouldn't spin, so it wouldn't get agitation, you wouldn't get spin. So we're just pulling the old motor coupler off. I'm using a standard head screwdriver to pull the rubber piece out. We're going behind it, so I have a little more leverage. And there we go. There's the whole thing. There's the back side of it and the rubber piece. We'll grab our new one. You can get this on Amazon or have it sent to your house or at appliance part stores. I like going to Reliable Parts. They're great. So here's our part number. What I'll do is I'll put the plastic part on first. This one has a little metal insert, so it's actually a better improvement. The engineers made it a little bit stronger. I'll put the plastic and metal piece on first on the transmission, and I'm going to tap it in a little bit to get it to sit further down to be more flush with the transmission shaft. I'll just use a socket with an extension. Now we're going to put the same type of an assembly on the motor. The motor has those two parts of the shaft, the short one and the long one. We're doing it on the short one. I'm going to tap it on with a socket and an extension, and I'm going to use a small hammer, just 5 or 6 taps to get it to sit more flush. There we go. And we'll do the same thing on the part of the motor coupler that touches the motor itself. Get that tapped on. These are little appliance hammers that I keep in my toolkit. Now we're going to do the same thing for the one on the motor. Tap that in. Okay, so we have that all set. Next thing is to lift up the motor and put it back on. We're going to put the rubber connector between the two plastic pieces on the motor. And we're going to put that in the 12 o'clock position. So one of the prongs is pointing toward the top at 12 o'clock. On the one on the motor, we're going to make one of the prongs point towards 6 o'clock. And that's so that the two can match up. I'm going to take these little rubber grommets that were on the motor and put them back on the transmission plate. I'm just going to push them in. And this part's a little tricky to get everything to line up. There's 4 pins on the motor that have to line up with those four grommets, and then we've got to get the motor coupler to line up. So just take your time, go slow. The motor's kind of heavy. I like to support it with one hand and then kind of watch how the pins line up. I'm putting the bottom pins in to the grommets, and I'm just pushing in a little bit, wiggling things around so the motor coupler can go in. If it doesn't feel like it's going in, you can pull it back out and check the alignment of the motor coupler again until it lines up. I'm putting in the top clip. I'm going to push it in and then turn it 90 degrees. And I'm going to push the motor in toward the transmission and pull down hard on that clip. And it locks in. I'm using 2 thumbs. I'll do the bottom one. Same thing, I'm going to push the motor in toward the transmission plate and lift up on the clip. It's kind of spring-loaded. It'll just snap into place. There we go. So now we're just going to put those 2 1/4-inch screws in to hold the clips. Some models, again, don't have that. You almost don't really need these screws. They're not critical. The older ones don't even have the screws. Now we're going to put the water pump back on. And to do that, we have to make sure we line up. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going to put the electrical connectors back on. We'll put the modular connectors back onto the capacitor. We'll hook up these 2 modular connectors here. The black one and the white one link up. And then we'll put the wire harness back onto the motor. Make sure everything is on tight because you don't want to have to pull the cabinet off again to recheck it. Just make sure everything's where you want it before we put the cabinet back on. We're going to try to line up the shaft on the motor to be in the same alignment as the inner part of the water pump. So you just want to look at the two, make sure the 2 shapes are the same, and then you can put the pump back onto the shaft. Take a good look at it. You'll see that the 2 shapes have to line up. There's a male part and the female part. Male part on the motor, female part on the water pump. So we got the water pump on there snug. We're going to put its clips back on too. So we're going to put in the bottom one, turn it 90 degrees, and then push up on it. It's also kind of spring-loaded. It'll just snap on. There we go. Do the top one. There we go. All right. And now we're going to put the cabinet back on. By the way, when I was doing that procedure, I had that washer supported at about 45 degrees to make it easier to see everything. You don't have to do that, but it does make it a little bit easier. I'm going to tilt the cabinet back to 45 degrees. I'm going to put in the bottom lip first, snugly against the frame. So I want to look in there, make sure it's as snug as it can get, and then I'll lean the cabinet back, and I'll get the back plate to line up. Check it on both sides. And then I'll put in those brass clips to hold that back plate onto the cabinet. Really cool system. This locks everything in place. So I put in the one on the back plate and then I just push down really hard and that'll lock in that brass clip. Do the left side, push it down and lock it in. Do my modular connector for the lid switch. I'm going to bring the console, I'm going to lift the console up a little bit first and then hinge it down and put the little plastic pieces into the cabinet and then push the console back toward the back wall, and then I'll put in the 2 Phillips head screws. They go in at about a 45-degree angle. And one thing that's good to do when you're all done with these direct drives is to lift up, once you get in position, lift up on the back a few times. Lift up, down, and that'll take the back legs and it'll do self-adjustment so that it's more level. So I'm going to fill it up and test out agitation, and then I'll test out spin, make sure it's all working. Sure, plug it back in. So there's agitation, looks good. I'm going to test it for spin. I'll bypass the lid switch by pressing in here, and then you can see it draining and spinning. So it's doing good. So back to normal, and this should last forever as long as we don't wash heavy things. All right, thanks so much for watching, and please subscribe when you get a chance.